Hi everyone, welcome to this FSSC Insights webinar. This is the first webinar fully dedicated to our new FSSC 24,000 scheme for social management systems. We are really happy with the over 800 people that registered to this webinar. Many thanks for all of you being here. Today we have 3 experts from the FSSC team presenting. We have Elsabe, our technical director. Welcome, Elsabe. And then we have Ante, Batinic. Thanks for being here. Ante, you flew in from Croatia. You are our technical manager, social sustainability. And then we have joining from Switzerland, Francisco Esteve. He is our strategic advisor, FSSC 24,000. And then let's go to the topics of today. I will first give a short introduction to FSSC. And then Elsabe will explain why we extended our scope from food safety only to social sustainability as well. Then Francisco will continue on the market drivers. He will explain why he considers FSSC 24,000 as both a necessity and an opportunity to any organization within the food and the non-food industry. Then Ante will tell you more about the what of our scheme, and we will try to finish in time to have 50 minutes left for our Q&A session. That brings me to some practicalities. You're all muted. That's because of the number of people in this webinar. But we really like to see your questions. So please come in with your questions, submit them to us, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And finally, this webinar is being recorded. We will share the presentation and the recording after this webinar through email and on our website. Some of you might already know us, but because we are now reaching out to a much wider audience than food safety professionals only, I think it's good to start with a short introduction to FSSC. I'll do that by explaining our branded house to you. Let me start with the roof, because that's about our ultimate goal. Our vision as a non-profit organization, a foundation, with independent governance is that we want to contribute to creating a better world. Our mission is to be the leading brand that provides trust and delivers impact to the consumer goods industry. And how we provide trust and deliver impact is what you see in our 3 pillars. The first pillar is about our schemes. It's the FSSC 22,000 scheme for food safety management systems and the new FSSC 24,000 scheme for social management system. The second pillar is about assurance. Reliable audits and reliable certification is extremely important. And we have a robust program in place to ensure, together with our partners, that our audits are of the at a high level of quality and the highest level of assurance. And you always need to improve. That's why the third pillar is about continuous improvement. And every house needs a solid foundation. Ours is based on our 5 values. It's transparency, integrity, ambition, engagement, and care. If you would like to know more about us, please reach out to our website, fssc.com. You can always reach out to us through the contact form on the website, but you can also reach out to our representatives. They are there to support you. Our next public webinar will be on food loss and waste as part of our 22,000 scheme for food safety management systems. Those who would like to join that webinar, please mark the date, save the date. It's on Wednesday, the 6th of December. And now we would like to ask you some questions. We have 3 questions for you. So I think you can start the poll. So only so far 50% of you have provided their replies. So please, you could still provide your reply. 70%, okay, we will move to the next poll. Okay, 66% of you work in food safety. Great that you are also interested in our scheme for social management system, and please feel free to share the information with your colleagues that might be interested in social sustainability as well. So let's move to the second question. Could you please vote again, because the system had to restart the poll? Okay, thanks for your reply. So many of you are within a certification body, or a lot of you within a manufacturing company. So great to see you are all here. We will start the third and final poll now. Okay, so we have most of your votes, and the large majority has experience with management systems, so that's great. Okay, thanks all for your poll replies. Enough general talk for now. Let's hand over to Elsabe. Elsabe, please go ahead.
Thank you, Atie. And it's really great to see that we have so many people joining our webinar today. As said, I will focus today on providing you with a little bit of background on the scheme and why we actually ventured into the social sustainability arena, but also give you an update on our journey with FSSC 24000 to date. So most of you probably know us through FSSC 22000, which is our flagship scheme, and that is focused on food safety management system certification. But as Atie has mentioned before, our vision, or the vision of the Foundation, is to create a better world. And when we looked at our strategy, we realized that we really have to enlarge our footprint if we want to achieve that. And therefore, we also looked at what is it that we want to do. We want to create impact linked to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but also stay aligned with our management system approach. And therefore, we decided that we need to develop in the social sustainability space, but not just a social sustainability scheme, also a social management system scheme. The other thing is once an organization is certified, that we want to provide them recognition, and we do that through our certified organizations by displaying them on the public register on our website. And importantly, as Atie was referring to previously, we also have governance and oversight of certification through the Foundation's integrity program. And that's also our trust pillar. So two very important pillars as part of all of this, the trust and the impact, and ultimately working towards our vision of creating a better world. So now that you have a little bit of an idea as to why we started that, let's have a look at our journey and where we are today. It all began back in 2021 when we commissioned BSI to develop the PAS 24000. FSSC was part of that working group, and we also at the same time established a working group for FSSC 24000 to work on the scheme requirements. And we involved various stakeholders, including industry, certification bodies, as well as accreditation body. But to test the auditability of the scheme, pilot audits were conducted, and we conducted 10 pilot audits in 10 different countries, ranging across Europe, Asia, the US, and Latin America. And we were very happy that the outcome was mostly positive, but we also took that feedback along and used it as input for scheme development. We wanted to also make sure that we closely align the FSSC 24000 scheme with the FSSC 22000 scheme, specifically around the requirements for certification bodies and accreditation bodies. But as with anything new, we also recognize the importance of providing support solutions, both to our organizations or to organizations who want to implement the scheme, as well as to auditors. And therefore, we developed guidance documents, mostly focused on the implementation of a social management system scheme, because that was also one of the key outputs from the pilot audits, is that is the unknown, is how to implement a social management system. So the guidance documents are there to guide and to help provide support and information in terms of how to go about it. But in addition, we also developed a full e-learning course to support our certification bodies, their auditors, as well as the accreditation bodies, and to help explain the scheme requirements to them. And we're very happy that at the end of October 2022, we reached a really important milestone in that we published FSSC 24000. Now we are in the process of onboarding our new certification bodies, but also obtaining recognition to SSCI and approval to IAF as part of our market acceptance drive. But it's also important to emphasize what is the scope of FSSC 24000. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here, but top line, it is aimed at organizations in the consumer goods manufacturing and processing sector that covers both food and non-food, and including their related service providers. The scope refers to the economic sectors and activities which is related to the IAF codes, or also in IAF ID1. And if you want to have more detail in terms of what that entails, you can have a look in the scheme document itself. But we do not cover all activities, and therefore there is also exclusions included in the scope. For example, processing and manufacturing and the related trade of tobacco and tobacco products, fur and fur products, weapons, explosives and ammunition, and nuclear fuel products are not included and cannot be certified to FSSC 24000. And then the integrated management systems. You will hear a lot about this, and I'm happy to see from the polls that most of you understand management systems and it's known to you, which is also why, in summary, FSSC 22000 and FSSC 24000 are the only schemes that currently fully align with the ISO management system approach according to the ISO harmonized structure, which facilitates the integration with other ISO management systems. For example, if you have organizations that's currently certified to FSSC 22000 or other ISO standards such as ISO 9001 or ISO 14001, then these organizations can adapt their internal management systems and use that skills to include the social performance. It also allows for integrated management system auditing, and that's both internally within the company, so when you do the internal audits, but also externally from a certification perspective. And ultimately, what the aim is breaking down the silos to facilitate integrated and holistic management, resulting in meaningful and continuous improvement. So that is just very top line, a little bit of background in terms of why we decided to develop the scheme. Ante will go into more detail in terms of what the scheme is about. But for now, I would like to hand over to Francisco, who is our market expert and who will give you some more information on the market drivers. So Francisco, thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Elsabe. Welcome, everybody. My name, as Elsabe said, is Francisco Esteve. I provide strategic advice to FSSC now, after many years on the food business, working for the last 6 years as compliance manager of the Nestle Group out of my close to 30 years career in Nestle. I was part of the team with the British Standard Institute that created BAS 24000, and also part of the team with FSSC that created FSSC 24000. I'm retired now, but if I am here, it's because I believe that FSSC 24000 is a good audit scheme, is a good standard, which deserves to be seen in action, contributing to a better world. In fact, I think FSSC 24000 is a necessity, and I will try now to explain you why after all these years that I've been working on the compliance side. So let's see what is the dynamics on the market, okay, and discuss the dimensions shown in this image. I will let you scan through it. I will just bring some topics that we can discuss due to the time limitation that we have. So look at the quadrant about social environment, okay, NGOs, activists. We will talk today about the external stakeholders and the requesters of well-governed people, because there are people asking for that. There is an increase in external pressure to properly govern social aspects and ensure good practices. As society evolves, the tolerance to unprofessional, dangerous, or corrupt behavior is less and less tolerated within companies, societies, and governments. Society at large is less and less tolerant with external abuses, corruption cases, bad work conditions on suppliers. We can argue that the responsibility of an enterprise is extended from its own operations down to the customers and end users and up to all suppliers. And you can get into trouble linked to all those elements, not only to what you directly do. Let's reflect on that. Ghana Group said that 71% of organizations work with more third parties than just 3 years ago. KPMG is telling us that 3% of organizations have experienced significant disruptions due to third party, not due to their operation. And the World Economic Forum is highlighting that 25% of a company market value is directly attributable to its reputation. Think about it. 1/4 of the market value of your company is based on reputation. NGOs and environmentalist activists influence the ways of thinking, accelerating public opinion towards less tolerance to abuses. Over the last years, you have a new figure that is the activist investor, either people or foundations, on the concept of socially responsible investment. An example that I know well is the Ethos Foundation, is 16 pension funds members, all together managing billions. This approach has been adopted now by banks and is fast developing. You have now banks that propose you socially responsible portfolios. NGOs and activist investors, they add to the social pressure to directly impact the boards, like at the General Assemblies. This is a ticking bomb for some companies and the perfect storm context, as we can see lately in some, let's say, complicated General Assemblies on some corporations just this year, this spring. We can conclude that third-party due diligence is an ethical and a business priority, as if you do not manage your own conditions of work, and if you don't manage the social environment of your company, as well as the social risk of your activities on your whole supply chain, which is a big task, you are heading for big trouble. Let's look at another of these quadrants here, the evolution of the regulatory context. Okay, legislators that follow on societal pressures via the political parties that respond with new ethical requirements. So this is a cycle that is retrofitting itself. Over the last years, legislation is incorporating concepts and principles of universality. And this is new. You have FCPA, the US Foreign Corruption Practice Act, that include themes like bribery and corruption, money laundering and terrorist financing, respect of sanctions, and human rights. Look at your own enterprise. Ensure that you have gift and invitation policies, whistleblower lines, code of conduct, corporate business principles. All that is flourishing now in corporations. Why companies are doing this? There are some drivers. Safety of the workers. All remember the Rana Place disaster in 2013. Customers of those companies operating at the Rana Place, they had their share of responsibility and they had trouble. Many corruption cases, Volkswagen, Enron, Mr. Madoff, the Wells Fargo Bank. You have the Me Too movement, and you have cases of unethical and illegal scandals, like the various Uber scandals in 2022. All those had a big impact into the reputation of the companies. And all they had direct impact on the financial of those enterprises, putting them at risk or even down to bankruptcy. Look at Enron. The regulatory context of the last years has massively evolved towards more control. You have laws with universal scope, like FCPA that we mentioned before. You have also the UK Bribery Act. You have laws like that in France, in Brazil, in many countries. You have new laws regarding compliance with economic and trade sanctions. Now you have sanctions from the UN Security Council, from the European Union, UK, US, OFAC, many different trade sanctions regulations to follow. You have regulations regarding to the protection of human rights. You have the UK Modern Slavery Act, similar in Australia, California Transparency on Supply Chain. You have similar laws in Germany, in France, have many going around. And then money laundering, you have also in UK, you have the transfer fund regulation, European Union Anti-Money Laundering Directives, US Bank Secrecy Act, and many others. So now non-compliance, and this is important to understand, the non-compliance with these laws may result in the cancellation of your license to operate in a country, okay? And with fines, very big fines. Goldman Sachs in 2020 have a 3.3 billion fine. Airbus had the same year a 2 billion fine. And also fines include also disgorgement, that is adding to the amount of the fine all the perceived benefits that you may have made with this illegal action. It goes up to, for example, in FCPA, 5% of the net proceeding of sales, or your company, make your calculation what it is. Worse, social-related scandals can bring down the reputation of the company and produce reduced sales, cancellation of cooperation or contract with partners, boycotts, negative campaigns from customers and end users, and NGO adverse activity and focalization on you, accelerating this vicious cycle, and in some cases that can put you down to bankruptcy. I will conclude, remind you that your board, the board of all the companies, are risk-driven. So they move by risk, and having you reflecting about the fact that when you do a corporate risk assessment, reputational risks are considered higher than financial risk. So because of that, I think 24,000 is an opportunity. It's needed and is filling an existing gap. What is the situation on the market? What other standard exists for covering all the risks that we have discussed before? You have SA 8000 is the only other scheme that runs a management system, but their approach is not an ISO management system, it's an in-house system defined and managed by the scheme owners. It's mostly used by big corporations, but for them, as most probably all big corporations, they have other ISO certifications, which looks to be the case that 2/3 of you, they have said on the poll that you know about management system. So it will make a lot of sense to move to an ISO-like scheme, which is already something mastered by your organization, and it will help to harmonize and simplify your environment with a single way to operate using all across the same management system. You have SMETA that has no management system approach, and it's about auditing only. It's not a certification scheme and doesn't have requirements for follow-up audit at a specific interval. SMETA is an instant picture. It's largely used, but it's really reducing your risk. There's no risk assessment before. You just go through a checking list and that's it. So companies using SMETA, maybe they don't know what is a management system, what it implies, but they may have knowledge on the social side. We can ask ourselves, what is the added value for their own companies? Maybe in some cases they are just trying to satisfy customer, make a SMETA audit, it's done, make a picture and go on. You have on top of that a total cacophony of more than 300 private and public schemes, each one different, each one invented or managed by their own company. So FSSC 24,000 has an ambition that is to fill that gap and become a standard of reference, integrating 24,000 into an existing system of ISO-like standards, and that makes a lot of sense. We believe there is also an interesting opportunity with FSSC 24,000 for already ISO-certified organizations, as we said before, that they have certification on other topics, like 22,000 on food safety, 9,001 on quality, 40,001 on environment, 45,001 safety, health, information security, or you name it. You already have in place a management system, add just another ISO-like standard covering the gap with an ISO-aligned social certifiable scheme as we are proposing. As a bonus, you have the possibility to integrate this into an existing integrated management system, managing various certifications covering various different topics with the same harmonized structure. as we saw before on the slide from Elsabe. So I will finish stating my conviction that 24,000 is an opportunity to all companies. The ESG, environmental, social, and governance movement is here to stay for a while. The stress generated by climate change is focalizing the public opinion on the sustainability concept. People focalize on the E of environment, but this is only part of the picture. The sustainability concept is not possible with the E only if it extends to social sustainability. On the ESG, the S is social and the G is governance, is what FSSC 24,000 is driving, like all ISO standards, to do. The European Union has now requirements reporting on what is called double materiality. So that means reporting not only what your financial results have been, but also what has been your impact into the nature and into the environment and into the social surroundings of your enterprise, inside and outside the enterprise, to produce those financial results and showing, therefore, for the first time, a full picture of the societal impact of the activities of a corporation. Other countries outside the European Union are now fast moving, and 24,000 can provide factual evidence for these new required reports. So you will have not only greenwashing, you will have factual material that you can show as the result of your management system that yes, you are properly covering all the risks related to the social side on your enterprise. It's also an opportunity from an ethical point of view to do the right thing, to set the adequate governance, a CISO standard force setting the right governance through the management system requirements. So 24,000 is a differentiating factor. It can be a differentiating factor between you and your competition, as it proposes good practice which you can use to differentiate from competitors. Or it can be a risk if a competitor uses those good practice as differentiating factors from you, if you don't do them. So good practices on ESG include participation to the United Nations Global Compact, alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, responsible sourcing, sustainability of production, sustainability of the supply chain, as availability is now becoming an issue and is a key for corporations, and certifications. I strongly encourage you to explore those options. We are linking 24,000 to some of those, like the UN Sustainability Development Goals. One can argue that sometimes companies produce some greenwashing and unsubstantial certifications, but more and more metrics are set to avoid this, and NGOs look over the shoulders to identify and publicize these cases. So greenwashing is becoming more and more risky and uncertain. FSSC 24,000 is the same approach of integrity and verification as FSSC 22,000, which is the recognized leader in food safety. And all the experience and trust of FSSC is used and present into 24,000 as well. So I hope this was a good food for thought and explain why FSSC is taking this route. Let me now give the floor to Ante Batinic, who will expose and explore with you the insights of 24,000. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you very much, Francisco, for this very informative presentation and your thoughts on 24,000 and why we believe that 24,000 is the right scheme for organizations seeking for a social management system. Today, I will introduce you with the technical particularities of FSSC 24,000, including its structure, how it is designed, and of course, we will talk a little bit about the benefits, the technical benefits, of course, apart from the facts that have been delivered by Francisco. We have already covered the management system approach. Elsabe has already mentioned the benefits, and Francisco has covered in more detail why FSSC 24000 is built around the management system. Of course, the main benefit is, as you might know, or the most of you that are joining this webinar today understand that the management system is built around a common framework that aligns basically all functions that are required by a management system. It uses a common language and approach in order to apply all the scheme requirements. When we think about management system, we all talk about the risk-based approach, and including the risk-based approach, organizations identify the linked opportunities to integrate systems and processes. Now, I will not reduce everything to a management system, because today we are talking about a social management system. And the social management system, in fact, uses and utilizes the Plan, Do, Check, Act process, and in short, the PDCA, which the most of you are familiar with, which ensures the identification and control of social risks and the process of continuous improvement. I would like to take the opportunity to highlight the term continuous improvement, because this is a core principle which you will find throughout the entire scheme requirement. Given the continuous improvement, we ensure, and FSSC 24000 ensures, that all the identified risks are implemented according to the scheme requirements and, of course, according to the expectation and needs of the organizations and all the linked interested parties. So, of course, we have a 3-year certification cycle, which is based on the management system approach. As you can see in this slide, we start with a stage 1 and stage 2 initial audit. Of course, the stage 1 audit is intended to identify the maturity of a management system and the readiness of an organization to go with the stage 2 audit. It consists of 2 surveillance audits and, of course, an optional recertification audit if an organization decides to continue with the certification. One advantage is, of course, that if we compare a 3-year certification cycle, that it reduces the stress of an annual certificate validity. And in addition to that, organizations can organize in a timely fashion and prepare themselves for a potential audit. Certification bodies have also the opportunity to perform audits in different seasons or timings in the year. So in this case, they are able to observe different processes and activities in an organization. So very important is to understand the structure of 24000 and how it is designed in its nature. As you can see, we have the PAS 24000 management system part, which entails the common framework across the supply chain and manages the requirement and communication that is spread throughout the entire organization and, very important, to all stakeholders identified by the organization. Then, in addition, we have Annex A, which is part of the PAS 24000. Annex A basically includes all the minimum requirements to ensure a certain level of social performance. Again, it's a minimum requirements, but the continuous improvement process and the due diligence expected by an organization usually goes beyond those minimum requirements. And then lastly, we have the FSSC 24000 requirements. It's a set of processes, specific requirements to ensure integrity of the scheme and providing governance and management of the scheme. In the next slide, you will see a more detailed depiction how the structure of 24000 is basically designed. If we take a closer look at the PAS 24000 management system part, you will see it's basically designed on the management system process. it's very important, and the reflection on the right-hand side, to see and recognize the PDCA cycle, starting with the identification of the context of the organization and the leadership. The leadership is basically the starting point in order to delegate, identify, and implement all the related requirements that is required and mandated by the PAS 24000 management system. Then the biggest part, everything is basically funneled into the risk and opportunities section. So this is the risk-based approach that you will find in the scheme. And it leads to the continuous improvement ultimately. So, and the PAS 24000 Annex A, you will see that, and this is mostly covered in many of the social schemes that you will find in the market, which is generally the minimum expectations identified by the ILO conventions and partially by the SDGs. So we have the human rights policies, we have forced labor, we have child labor, and all other requirements that are expected to be met by an organization. So the initial starting point would be to develop a human rights policy that covers all these requirements and should be followed and implemented by the organization, and very important, to all linked and identified stakeholders within an organization. So the third part is the FSSC 24000 requirements. It consists of 5 additional sets of requirements. The first one is very important to understand, to identify the expectations by your organization, what your organization needs to fulfill in order to meet those requirements. You will also see that there are requirements for certification bodies, requirements for accreditation bodies, and we have also requirements in order to meet the integrity program of the foundation. The integrity program is a vital part of our government structure. So the integration is a very important section and part of FSSC 24000. It enables seamless integration and transition of existing and valid certificates held by organizations that have an existing accredited third-party social certification to another standard or certification program recognized by SSCI. So basically the key benefits are the audit duration of the transition audit can be reduced based on the existing certification. And secondly, a transition that covers all aspects of human rights obligation and supply chain due diligence. So these are a very important benefits that can be covered with 24000. The additional requirements, however, of 24000 are designed to provide a robust and systematic certification process that ensures a continuous improvement methodology and a risk-based audit approach. In addition to the general principles and requirements specified in PAS 24000 and FSSC 24000, reinforces the core requirements with the following aspects and requirements. So we have the scheme documents, and what does FSSC 24000 entail? What does it incorporate? First of all, we have the FSSC 24000 scheme. In addition to that, we have a so-called Board of Stakeholders decision list. This decision list is intended if we decide to make some minor changes that does not necessarily lead to a major scheme revision, will include and will be included in the Board of Stakeholder decision list. So far, we do not have any additional changes, but in the near future, it might be that those changes will be included in the Board of Stakeholders decision list. In addition to that, we have Annex 1, which details the FSSC 24000 CB scope statements. Then in Annex 2, we have the CB audit report requirements. It's worth to mention that this section contains only the minimum content that should be included in the audit report. However, we at the Foundation FSSC, we have designed and published a unified audit report that must be utilized and used by all the CBs as the audit report. And lastly, we have Annex 3, which contains the CB certificate template laid out, the minimum requirements and content that should be included into a certificate. All these documents are, of course, free to download on the official FSSC website. Guidance documents. Of course, we provide guidance documents in addition to the scheme documents. Currently, there are four guidance documents available, and of course, also free to download on the FSSC website. The first is the assessment of risk and opportunities. As mentioned in the previous slides, it's very important to understand and to analyze existing or potential risks and opportunities within a social management system. It's very important also to mention that without a proper risk assessment, it will be not possible to implement a full functioning and robust social management system. The context of the organization can be found in PAS 24000. It's basically to identify the scope of the organization, the linked interested parties, meaning the stakeholders, and very important to also involve all the workers, all employees within the umbrella of one organization seeking to be certified against FSSC 24000. Operational planning and control is also very important. We have provided more detailed guidance on this requirement in order to understand to which extent the planning and control should be established and implemented within one organization. And lastly, which is, I believe, a very important aspect when talking about social management system or social certification is supply chain management. And therefore, we have developed a set of interpretive articles for social procurement and human rights due diligence, because controlling the supply chain within the social management is very important and a key practice that should be done at the very initial stage when going for a social management system certification. So in addition to these four guidance documents that we have developed and introduced, we have planned to develop 3 additional guidance documents that should be developed and published in the course of this year. The first one is child labor. It will include a more clearer definition and implementation guideline. Then topics such as forced and compulsory labor, and then we will also try to provide you a more detailed description and guidance for grievance mechanisms and complaint management. So I believe this is very important, how to obtain certification. Usually organizations that are seeking a certification against 24000, they should actually start to get familiar with the FSSC 24000 documents, meaning so to study the FSSC 24000 scheme requirements, including the PAS 24000, supported by the guidance documents we have published on our website. The second step would be to conduct an internal audit against the requirements of 24000. Internal audits are the most effective way or the most effective tool to identify the gaps, the risks and the opportunities that we have mentioned in our previous slides, in order to understand the readiness in order to implement 24000 requirements. So this is linked to the third step, action and implement any identified issues, shortcomings as a result of the identified risks. Usually this is done in form of a risk assessment, and this gives an indication to the organization which actions should be taken in order to get closer to the FSSC 24000 requirements. So then followed by to establish a contact, 24,000 license CB to arrange an audit. Of course, it must be planned. And as Elsabe already mentioned, we are currently in the process to issue the first provisional license to the certification bodies. And this would be the logical consequence for an organization to reach out to a licensed certification body. So the fifth option is then to conduct the initial or transition audit. As said, there are two possibilities. Either you go for an initial certification, or if you have an existing accredited certification, you can go for a transition audit. And the last step would be to obtain the scheme certification and have your organization added to the FSSC public register, which is accessible for all on our website. So that's everything from my end, and I would like to hand over to Atie for the Q&A part.
Okay, thanks Ante, thanks Francisco, thanks Elsabe for your great presentations. We were not able to manage to stick to our timetable. Sorry for that. Let's quickly start the Q&A session now. Elsabe, perhaps I can start with you. There's a question on when FSSC 24,000 certification audits are allowed to start. In fact, there were more questions related to that. And additionally, is there a same time frame gap between stage 1 and stage 2 audits as for the FSSC 22,000 scheme?
Okay, I'll try and remember all the questions, Atie.
I will repeat them if necessary.
You can remind me. But essentially, the good news is that organizations can already go for certification to 24,000. It was available when we launched the scheme back in October last year. And as Ante was mentioning, we're onboarding certification bodies. So we currently have 2 who've gone through the onboarding process and are able to deliver unaccredited audits. So yes, the organizations can start.
That's great.
And then to the second question about the timelines between a stage 1 and stage 2, it's exactly the same as 22,000 because we are using the same approach as in 17021. So those timelines that's defined in the 3-year certification cycle is exactly the same between 22 and 24,000.
Okay, thanks a lot. Ante, perhaps this question is good for you. You mentioned the 3-year certification cycle. Can you perhaps point out some of the advantages and the disadvantages for certified organizations?
Yeah, it's a good question. I believe that most organizations would like to understand the benefits of a 3-year certification cycle. But basically, the biggest difference is actually that a 3-year certification cycle is linked to the validity of a certificate. So the certificate is basically valid for 3 years. And given this fact, it reduces the stress of an annual certification validity. So on top of that, there are other benefits for a 3-year certification cycle, meaning that certification bodies, they can organize themselves. And as previously already mentioned in my slides, there is the possibility to perform an audit through different time zones or seasons, which is sometimes very critical depending in which sector the organization is. So you will see, or you're most likely able to see other processes, productions, units that are probably not active during some part of the seasons. And the other thing is, if you have a surveillance audit each year, this gives the organization also enough time to prepare themselves. And based on the experience we have, sometimes organizations do not have that many changes in a half-year period, okay? And also, organizations most likely do not have significant changes in their organizations. So there is no need to go for an audit every half year. And we believe this is, this is based on the experience of a management system, is the logical consequence to go for annual surveillance and ultimately for a 3-year certification cycle.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ante. Then I would like to address a question to you, Francisco. I hope you are there. Could you please perhaps mention some of the biggest differentiators between FSSC 24000 and SA 8000 and SMITA and BRCGS ETRS?
Well, we discussed a little about that into the presentation. So you have two ways to approach a social audit. Either you have a checklist and you go with your checklist through point by point on pre-arranged, if you want, controls that they are supposed to cover risk, but that is a kind of one fits all. And that is what SMETA does. Or you can have a management system. The key of a management system is that it forces a certain number of things to happen to you, is having a governance and is having a certain number of resources, but it's mostly the fact of needing to have a risk assessment. You need to do a risk assessment that is specific to your company, because your activities, all your activities carry a risk. And depending on what you do, you will have different risks to cover, and therefore you will need to put in place different set of controls. So the list of the controls that you will have in place, or two organizations we have in place with 24,000, will dramatically change if you are working on the mining or on the primary sector in Africa, or if you are on the service sector in Western Europe. You are doing different activities, therefore you have different risks. You will need to analyze those risks, and that is what makes the difference. Now, inside those, you have only SA 8000 and 24,000. SA 8000 has its own management system, and what we believe is the benefit of 24,000 is that has an ISO management system that is exactly the same, using the same wording and the same way of operating that in any other ISO standard. I think it boils down to that.
Francisco. Ante, question for you. If a company is not certified with FSSC 22,000, is it possible for them to go for FSSC 24,000 certification?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Just a brief answer, no, it's not a prerequisite, because those two are separate schemes. So this is not mandatory to be certified against 22,000 in order to be or seek certification against 24,000.
And perhaps from my side, a leather industry company cannot be certified to FSSC 22,000. Yes. Yeah. So for them, of course, it's also possible to go for FSSC 24,000 certification. Elsabe, a final question for you, because I think we have to wrap up this Q&A session. What does the integrity program for FSSC 24,000 include?
Okay, yeah. I think that's a very important question, Atie, and as I referred to previously, it's also how we ensure trust from the foundation side. And basically, we use our program to monitor our certification bodies, to make sure that they deliver and implement the scheme requirements as they're supposed to. And we do that through a variety of ways. So there's desk reviews, office assessments, but we also have some other monitoring tools that we utilize. So we keep a close eye on that. But I think it's also important to emphasize that it's not just monitoring performance. We also have an onboarding program. And this is where we help new CBs that come on board to explain the scheme requirements to them and help them so that they can actually have a good chance of implementing in the way we want to. So it's sort of twofold. On the one hand, there's performance monitoring and compliance. And on the other hand, we also try and support as much as we can. Because ultimately, if they implement it correctly, we all win.
Great. Thanks for your reply, Elsabe, and thanks to all three of you for your great presentations and responding to the questions. Yes, the hour is already over. There were a lot of questions coming in. Sorry if we were not able to reply to your specific question. Please feel free to reach out to our website for any further information. Please follow our socials. We might come back to some of the questions on our socials as well. And please follow our socials. You could also subscribe to our quarterly newsletter. Through these media, we will announce any further the upcoming webinars. We might consider having a follow-up webinar dedicated to 24,000 as well, given your many questions coming in and the great participation to this webinar. So thank you all for being here, being with us, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks a lot.